Okay, so with me now is the cat in the hat himself, Dr Rob Wray from HACT. And what could potentially be a rather dry subject, that of data, rarely is where Rob's concerned. And because we're sort of focusing on the tenant voice on Housing Day, it'd be good just to sort of have a look at the project you're working on around the data standards and how that can perhaps feed into sort of helping with the tenant voice in terms of getting it out there, reaching tenants that perhaps aren't engaged at the moment. Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, I mean, as everybody knows, there's an exponential increase, or there has been an increase in the amount of data that we're collecting about our residents and about our customers. And as that volume of data increases, we need to be able to keep pace with the rest of the sector, to be able to ensure that there are the right mechanisms and the right models, the right platform in order to be able to kind of contain that data. Yeah. And in particular, because I think it's a very rich source of information that will allow us to understand the behavioural profiles of how our residents interact with our services. In the past, we've kind of traditionally used kind of satisfaction surveys and so on, and that's just been kind of trying to understand the perception of residents by asking them what they think are the kind of main challenges and issues and so on, which are particular to them or relevant in the context of their lives. Yeah. And quite often, more recent research, as we've started to get this profile data through things like CRM and the advent of more self-serve pieces of, parts of software and so on, is that there is often a disconnect between how people use the service in practice and what they think themselves or they perceive to be issues. Yeah. And that's come about much more and more as we've kind of created more data.
Yeah. So is it really about the shaping of services on the back of engagement?
Yeah, I think that from an engagement perspective, what's happening now is that I think is that there's starting to be a shift in the sector in the way that people regard or define engagement. And before there was the risk that there was a kind of if you like, intrinsic or extrinsic value rather of people kind of interacting through focus groups and so on in terms of co-design and shaping services from a resident perspective into the organisations, and obviously, who better to ask how you deliver a service than the person that's receiving it. Yeah. But at the same time, we're trying to move towards, I think, somewhere where there's a bit more of an intrinsic value to people. So what is more relevant from a resident involvement perspective in the context of people's lives? And I think quite often, part of the challenge is kind of aligning what the business strategy and what the identity and the vision of the different organisations are, which obviously changes depending on which organisation you're referring to. But what I mean by that, I guess, is that on the one hand, you may have traditional resident involvement models which hold residents, close to our bosom, and they leave social housing feet first in 25 years, and that encourages a kind of, it's to some extent, however controversial, it encourages something of a kind of dependency culture. Yes. But sometimes at the other end of the organisation, you've got a situation where we're using fixed term tenancies and so on in order to be able to kind of make sure that residents, or ask residents not to be satisfied, which is a good way of turning customer satisfaction data on its head. But flipping to the aside, the part of the issue with that is that we want to make sure that the resident involvement, for example, is relevant in the context of people's lives rather than it just being about the organisation.
Absolutely. And how are the data standards going at the moment? Are you getting a lot of organisations signing up?
Yeah, I mean, it's as you said at the beginning, it can be, data can sometimes be a slightly arid subject to get into people's heads. And I think that there's increasingly, though, a real energy and momentum around what we've been trying to kind of to achieve with version 1. So version 1 was launched last year, and that was a kind of pilot organisations being involved. And like any of these initiatives, you have the kind of I Love Data Standards t-shirt wearing organisations that drive and really get the understanding and concept of where we can go with having good data. And then now that we've brought even more partners on, and we've started to kind of get a real momentum going for version 2. And it tackles the things that residents and organisations alike have at the top of their wish lists for things to fix. And so reactive repairs is something that we're looking at in version 2, and income management and so on. So there's been a real shift in the kind of interest around it. And I think organisations are starting to wake up to the fact that they need to have more comprehensive and robust, accurate data in order for us to be able to kind of shape services accordingly. Otherwise, it can end up distorting the strategy.
Absolutely. Rob, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.